Well, doing something a little different tonight. I know this is kind of short notice going live here on the channel from the booth with Mike. Just the other day, we passed 200 subscribers in the middle of summer. So I thought, well, let's do something a little bit different. Right now, I've been doing the OHL team history videos. Today, we posted the Windsor Spitfires team history, which it's been a lot of fun doing the team history. So hopefully you've been able to enjoy the team history videos as we go along. I'm also recording ahead of time. I think I still have to record 5 more teams, and then we'll have all 20 up. So it's a fun little project to do, just as a side gig, and it's been a lot of fun just seeing how this channel has grown. The plan is to continue covering the OHL here on YouTube. I'll be also doing some more interviews as we go. I have a couple of interview candidates that might come on the channel in the next couple of weeks or so, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, let me know in the comments your thoughts on the channel, and maybe something that you'd like to see covered a little more in depth when it comes to the Ontario Hockey League. So there were a couple of news items today. I didn't record a video because I thought I'd wait until going live here. There's just a few signings that have taken place. First off, just want to say congrats to Braden Bowman, the captain of the Guelph Storm. He signed with the Henderson Silver Knights. So it's exciting to see that another AHL signing has taken place. So big congratulations going to Braden Bowman. He had a really good season with the Guelph Storm. It's just unfortunate the season kind of got away from the Guelph Storm last year as they ended up falling down the Western Conference standings, but still a good showing for Bowman, and he's going to be playing with Henderson Silver Knights next season. Let's see what else we've got. Sam Dickinson, the London Knights defenseman, he has signed his NHL entry-level contract today. Of course, he went to the San Jose Sharks. It was kind of a back and forth trying to figure out, would it be Zane Parekh or Sam Dickinson being picked first from the Ontario Hockey League? But, of course, it ended up being Beckett Seneca. Sam Cosentino, when I did that interview with him, he was suggesting that Seneca could be picked in the top 5, but he ended up going third overall, and then it was followed by Parekh and then Sam Dickinson. So Dickinson is now the 4th OHLer to sign his NHL entry-level contract. So we've got Seneca, Parekh, Jet Lachenko, and now Sam Dickinson. And Daniel says, such a great idea. I was waiting for my Rangers to come out, and it was very good. Well, thank you, Daniel, for waiting for that one. I grew up watching the Kitchener Rangers, so when I did that one, I was pretty excited to go over. It's kind of nice to go down memory lane, so it was a lot of fun. Glad you enjoyed that there, Daniel. I don't understand how Sam Dickinson didn't go higher. I was kind of wondering if he would go maybe top 8. That's kind of the area everyone was figuring Dickinson would go, but I'm not sure if it's maybe from the interviews or from, well, he wasn't there at the Combine because of the Memorial Cup, so not sure why he ended up falling, but the NHL draft was pretty fascinating because everything was wide open this year. We had Macklin Celebrini was figured to be number 1, but then after that, it was a guessing game really as to who would go in that top 10. Dickinson, I think he's going to fit in really nice with the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks doing a really good job at the draft with Celebrini, and then you had Dickinson. I think Dickinson maybe falling out of the top 10 might be good for him. It gives him a little more motivation going into next season. But yeah, I'm also a little surprised that Dickinson didn't go higher on that front. Another news item that just came out not too long ago, the Sudbury Wolves have announced that Drake Barahowski and Andrew Desjardins, they're going to be the assistant coaches for next season, which is kind of interesting because at the end of the regular season, when when Ken McKenzie announced his resignation, we were all kind of figuring Drake Barahowski was going to take over as head coach, but of course, that didn't transpire as Barney is going to take over as head coach. But it's good to see Barahowski sticking around with the Sudbury organizations as an assistant coach, which is great. And then Desjardins, he's a former Chicago Blackhawk. He won the Stanley Cup with them back in 2013, and he's from the greater Sudbury area. So it's good to see Desjardins getting his first assistant coach gig in the Ontario Hockey League, and that's going to be with the Sudbury Wolves. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Beckett Seneca deserved number 3. I would agree with that, Daniel, because Seneca, when he played, he was able to take over a game. And in that playoff series against the Barrie Colts in the first round, we really got to see what Beckett Seneca was capable of. And then when he was out of the lineup, it really hurt that Oshawa Generals team. And that's kind of like what the scouts, I think, were noticing too, is just how much he can control a game. Even though he's a younger player, he could probably add a little more size. But still, his talent level, able to control the game, is really impressive. So, yeah, no real surprise seeing Beckett Seneca going 3rd overall. I just loved his reaction when the Anaheim Ducks selected him there. That was probably the highlight of the NHL draft, just the reaction of Seneca having his name called by the Anaheim Ducks. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Oshawa Generals next season with the run they had to the OHL final. They weren't really expected to represent the Eastern Conference at the OHL Championship, but Beckett Seneca and company got the job done. And I know they're right now dealing with the coaching change, so we'll see how they go from Laxdal to O'Rourke. I know he was the assistant or the associate coach, so I think that Oshawa Generals should be okay going into next season, but it's going to be very interesting just to see how they'll do. It was sad that Oshawa didn't give London more of a fight. Well, I almost wonder if that's because they're missing Seneca. Seneca was out of the lineup due to injury. Connor Punnett also not 100%. Oshawa, they were hurt, but I think that kind of shows the difference of the conferences. The West definitely had more of the power last year compared to the East, and I'm almost wondering if the Ontario Hockey League needs to maybe take a look at restructuring the conferences, or maybe get rid of the conferences, maybe adopt a division-only system. I would personally love to see it if they introduced a 1 versus 16 playoff format. I know they did that for a few years in the Quebec League, but if the Ontario Hockey League would maybe change their playoff format a bit, I think they might be onto something, because it's with the way the cycles work. You've got some years the West is best, some years, even though it seemed rare, the Eastern Conference is better. We saw it 2 years ago when Peterborough won the OHL championship. The better teams were definitely in the East, but still, I'm kind of wondering if we'll see some changes, especially now that we've got a new commissioner leading the Ontario Hockey League with Brian Crawford. He might explore some of those ideas of maybe changing the playoff format, maybe realigning the conferences or divisions. But I would like to see maybe a few ideas there to at least change the playoff format. That's what I'd like to see. Also, I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at expansion in the next maybe 5-10 years, especially with more jobs becoming open in the National Hockey League. I wouldn't be surprised if the league's going to expand. Even Crawford during the press conference was asked about the GTA, and he said that he'd like to see a team in Toronto at some point if they could make it work. Obviously, Toronto's had a history with teams in junior hockey before. You had the Toronto Marlboros. They ended up moving on, and they're now the Guelph Storm. You also had the Toronto St. Mike's Majors, except they played out of St. Mike's College. That arena only had 1,600 seats. So I think they were kind of handicapping themselves there playing in that facility. But it'd be nice to see a team maybe back in Toronto. We'll have to wait and see, although attendance is probably going to be a concern, much like Mississauga and now Brampton. Now the Steelheads are going to the CAA Center. It's going to be fascinating to see how that all transpires. Is London still good this season? And more teams would be nice, because I love traveling to watch the games. You and me both. I love going on the road. I'm actually hoping to cover more Barrie Colt games on the road this season if my schedule allows it. I have a full-time radio job, so I work mornings here in Barrie, so travel is going to be interesting. I want to go to the first game up in Sudbury. I want to get start the season off right, covering the Barrie Colts on the road. But yeah, a few more teams would be nice for some travel purposes. And yes, I think the London Knights, they're going to be a good team again this season, although the question mark for them might be in net. Now that Michael Simpson has moved on, You've got Wilmore, who I'm sure is capable of taking over in the crease for the London Knights, but it's going to be an interesting situation, I think, for London. That's going to be the big question mark. Are they going to go out? Are they going to acquire another goaltender just to reassure the back end? It's obviously every team's got their areas of focus they need to work on. Last season, we saw Michael Simpson acquired before the season even started from the Peterborough Petes. So I think that expect once the trade window opens up again that the London Knights may explore adding a goaltender, although they do have a few goaltenders in their system, so maybe they're okay with going with Wilmore and one of their younger guys. It's a different approach that we don't see too often from the London Knights. They usually have a veteran goaltender in net, but maybe they will try something a little different. And what's also going to be different, if you watch the OHL games on Rogers for the last 4 or 5 seasons, if you watch the OHL here in Barrie or Kitchener, Guelph, Ottawa, even London, there's always 2 games at least that the Rogers channels didn't cover. My understanding is a new agreement's been reached between the OHL and Rogers, which means they will cover all the home games this season. So you don't have to worry about blackouts, because the OHL does mandate that every game has to be put on the OHL TV website. So it has to be broadcast somehow. And for the last, I think it was 4 or 5 years, Rogers hasn't broadcast all the games, but I've been informed that that's changing going into this season. So good news there for OHL fans that you will be able to watch all the games when it comes to broadcasts with Rogers TV. I know with Your TV, I don't think they skipped any games, or my understanding is they never skipped any games like Rogers was. But this season, all Barrie Colt home games will be broadcast, although we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Santa Claus parade in November, because Rogers TV usually covers that as well. But I'm sure that'll get all worked out. We still got a long ways to go between now and November. He also brought amazing what are able to do for the television side of things, because the camera crews are usually all volunteers behind the scenes with the audio, setting up all the tech is a lot of volunteers. So it's amazing what they're able to do, and it's going to be really cool just to see where it's going to all go from here. So Daniel says, best OHL content. Love the vids. Well, thank you, Daniel, for supporting the channel. This kind of just started as a fun side project because I already do the play-by-play with the Barrie Colts, so I wanted to continue to cover the OHL a little more in depth because here in Barrie, we don't have a lot of coverage when it comes to the Barrie Colts, and then it's hard to keep track of all the OHL teams. So I want the whole idea of this channel is to, yes, have a focus on the Barrie Colts, but also cover the entire OHL, figure out what's going on with the other teams. Because if you're a team in the Eastern Conference, you don't get to see the Western Conference teams all that often, but it's still good to know what's going on in the West, what's going on with the teams in the other divisions. And that's also been kind of fun talking to the broadcasters. I'm planning to continue that into next season. We'll get the other radio guys on. We'll get the other TV guys on. We'll talk about how the other teams are doing. We're going to continue that going into next season, continue the player interviews. We have to catch up, I think, with Cole Bodwin after he got drafted by the Utah Hockey Club. We'll catch up with Riley Patterson after being picked up by the Vancouver Canucks at the draft. So we'll continue to get the interviews on. We'll talk to the Colt players, probably talk to Marty Williamson, the head coach and general manager, at some point as well. But we'll continue to cover the Barrie Colts, but also taking a look at what's going on around the rest of the Ontario Hockey League. It's a fun league. It's a development league, and these are players that we get to see now before they go off to the National Hockey League, where tickets to go see them play there will be quite the difference from what we see right now. So that's where this channel is at. The channel is just going to continue to move along. It's nice that we've got over 200 subscribers now, so that means there's people who are enjoying the content, like Daniel was saying, and my goal is to continue covering the Ontario Hockey League as much as we can. And, it's probably one of the best. This is probably the best development league for the National Hockey League. So why not talk about it here on the channel? The goal is to have at least a video a day during the week. That's why right now we're doing the OHL history videos. I've been posting them in between news videos. I know there's been a lot of signings that have been taking place, so trying to fit the news signings in between with the history videos. I like the history videos. I love looking back at the all the different teams. The next history video, if my memory serves me right, is going to be the North Bay Battalion, I believe is the next one, because today was the Windsor Spitfires. I've been writing all the scripts for all 20 teams and recording ahead of time because it's the summer season. I've got my kids around the house, so I'm trying to record in between them being here and whatnot. So that's where we're going to continue with that. Daniel says, can't wait until the season starts. I'm done with watching baseball. Hopefully this season is full of cool stories. I agree. It was, even with the soccer last night, it was really cool just to be able to see Team Canada go up against Argentina. But man, soccer and hockey are so different. There's a lot of the situations where players would go down and trying to embellish to get the yellow cards and whatnot. And you watch that and it's like, I miss hockey, seeing the players get knocked down and get back up again, maybe punch a guy or two just to get their frustrations out. But yeah, you can only watch so much baseball, and especially when the Toronto Blue Jays are having their struggles. And it's you had all the hype during the offseason for the Blue Jays with Ohtani and whatnot. And you think that maybe the Blue Jays will improve, but it's they get right back to where they're at. And right now, it sounds like they want to trade everybody, but it'll be nice when we get hockey back. I'm looking forward to training camp, getting right back at the rink. I know the players are also eager to get back at it. It's still, the players need to have their downtime, but I know that a lot of them want to get back out on the ice. Also to note, I didn't mention this yet in the live stream, but Bo Jelsma has signed as a free agent with the Pittsburgh Penguins for their development camp. So he's getting another tryout with Pittsburgh. Going into the draft, I was actually told there was a chance that Jelsma was going to be a late draft pick. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out. It's unfortunate because Jelsma is a heart and soul player with the Barrie Colts. That's why they named him captain midway through the season. It'd be nice to see him get that chance to play at the National Hockey League level. But this is now the second chance he's been given with the Pittsburgh Penguins. At the end of the playoff run, he joined the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins of the American Hockey League to show him basically what he's got. And apparently the Penguins still interested in Bo Jelsma as he was given that invite to join the development camp. So some great news there for Barrie Colt fans that Bo Jelsma still getting the looks, and hopefully we'll see him out on NHL ice. He'll obviously be back for his overage season this year. He'll be counted upon. I think the Barrie Colts are going to have a much better season than what we saw last year, where they had to basically grind it out to make the playoffs. They did put up a good fight against the Oshawa Generals, but I would expect bigger things from the Barrie Colts. It also sounds like the Colts are looking to add. There's a few names floating around, but I don't want to start the speculation train. But it sounds like they want to go for a big forward. We'll have to wait and see if that pans out. Obviously, there's a lot to consider with players staying with their NHL clubs. Because if you think about it, with players such as Colby Barlow, for example, I'm just using it as an example, the Winnipeg Jets are probably going to give him a long look. But with all the injury time that he had last season, it might be best for him to come back to junior hockey, but they'll also look to hold on to him because of the 9 games. So that's a player that I'm sure teams will be looking at, because the Owen Sound Attack, I believe, are looking to rebuild. Their lineup's looking pretty young, although when you've got Carter George in net, he's probably the best goaltender in the Ontario Hockey League going into next season. Anything is possible with the Owen Sound Attack, but still, I think the Barrie Colts are a team that are looking to buy, and we'll see if they can find a trade partner at the start of the season, or if that'll be a trade that happens maybe later in the fall, closer to the Christmas break. Although if you wait too long, then you got the World Juniors, and you got to wait for that situation to play out as well. But still, the Barrie Colts look like they're going to be a much better team next season. Daniel says, any idea what teams will be competing this year? I would say that the Brampton Steelheads are going to be a very tough team next year in the Eastern Conference. Porter Martone, if you haven't seen the early draft predictions already for 2025, Martone could be picked ahead of Michael Misa next season, believe it or not. So it's the Steelheads are a team to watch out for. Oshawa should be good again, competing for top spot in the East Division. I would also say the Brantford Bulldogs could be a very tough team to beat in the East. So for the Eastern Conference, Steelheads, Bulldogs, Generals. I'd also put maybe the Colts and the Frontenacs, maybe. But I think those are probably your top teams in the East. In the West, the London Knights, they'll be back. The Erie Otters, though, look out for Erie. I think they're a team that could come under the radar a bit. They've got some great talent on that squad. Schaefer is going to take that next step after his rookie season. He's now going into his draft year. I think with Stan Butler, anything is possible. He's got that defense-first mentality. And if you can get playoff hockey down at the Erie Insurance Arena, that place is going to be rocking. So I think the Erie Otters are a team to look at for the Western Conference. Also, I almost want to say that the Sioux Greyhounds should have another pretty good season. I know they're losing some key pieces from last year's drive, but in the West Division, it looks wide open. Saginaw could be interesting. Zane Parekh should be back. You've got Michael Misa. So Saginaw, unless they decide to sell, because they traded away a lot of draft picks and young talent at the trade deadline, so they're going to look to recoup. But with the way the roster looks right now, maybe Saginaw could challenge for top spot in the West Division. But my favorite right now, I think, for the West might be the Erie Otters. I know it's way too early, but I think that's the team I might kind of lean towards. Maybe we'll see. It'd be like 2017 all over again. Otters and Steelheads in the OHL final. And, of course, that was the year the Erie Otters won the OHL championship in 5 games. So maybe that's the direction we're heading. We'll have to wait and see. Owen Sound was so disappointing. So much skill, but couldn't put it together. Yeah, Owen Sound for the last 3 seasons, it feels like they go into the year, all these expectations. I even thought the Owen Sound attack this past season would challenge for the Midwest Division, but boy, oh boy, was I wrong on that prediction, because they've got you've got Colby Barlow up front, you got Cedric Gandon, he's lights out at times, and then you had Sedley on the back end, Carter George in net. There is no reason why that team should not have finished top 4 in the Western Conference, but it's just you get the bad breaks, of course, with Greg Walters being fired and suspended at the beginning of the season, just 10 games in. I really think that threw off the dressing room. It took them a bit to regroup, and then Dale DeGray making the trade at the deadline to bring in McHugh and Smith from the Peterborough Petes. It looked like Owen Sound was going to go all in, but then stopped. They didn't acquire anybody else, and I almost wonder if that hesitation you're either in or you're out. You can't hesitate at the OHL trade deadline, and I feel like that's what happened to the Owen Sound attack. And because of that, they ended up dropping in the Western Conference standings. Guelph, too. They were another team that were disappointing, although they were waiting for Matthew Poitras to come back from the Boston Bruins. And if Poitras came back to Guelph, who knows? Maybe the Guelph Storm could have had a decent run in the West. Although the Kitchener Rangers, what a surprise to start last season. They were the hottest team coming out of the gate, along with the Sioux Greyhounds, and then kind of cooled off when the London Knights got on a heater. And the Midwest Division, it's so competitive year after year. And if you trip up at any point, it's easy to fall behind. And that's what we saw with Owen Sound, with Guelph, and then to an extent, the Kitchener Rangers. But they still ended up in that 4th seed in the Western Conference. Erie is so good. That playoff versus the Rangers almost killed me. So much young talent and hard work on Erie. Yeah, and that Erie Otters team going into last season, their goal was to make the playoffs, and they were successful in it. They hadn't been in the playoffs since 2017 when they won that OHL championship. And that young talent, and then Stan Butler behind the bench, they willed themselves into the playoffs, because they ended up losing Ben Gaudreau too to injury. He was injured on that road trip up in Sault Ste. Marie, and then they ended up dressing, I believe it was a total of 10 goaltenders last year. And for Erie, despite the run of goaltending injuries and sicknesses, they also had the limit as to how many games certain goaltenders could play. It was quite remarkable that the Erie Otters were able to finish fifth. And that Kitchener-Erie matchup last season, those Otters, that's why I say look out next season. If they can maybe acquire a couple of veteran pieces, I think the Erie Otters have the possibility of winning the West. But I'm sure the London Knights, they're going to pick up someone. They're going to do their additions. They're going to be much better. It's hard to believe that they'll be much better after winning the OHL championship last year. But with the way they lost the Memorial Cup, I wouldn't be surprised if Mark Hunter is going to look to rebound and pick up some key pieces to get that team, to take that next step to win another championship and maybe win the Memorial Cup. But still, the Erie Otters, they're going to be fun to follow next year. And if you get a chance to go to the Erie Insurance Arena, if you've never been, I highly recommend it. It's worth the trip. I would even try and connect it with, go to the Meridian Center in Niagara, catch the Ice Dogs. They're probably going to be a better team next year. I would think Niagara makes the playoffs. So you could do it where if you go on the road trip and you time it right, you go to a game in Niagara and then travel down to Erie, and you can catch both the Ice Dogs and the Otters. That'd be a good road trip. So if you ever get a chance to do that, if you've never been to either of those arenas, highly recommend it. Even if you're not a fan of whoever's playing, sometimes it's good just to go to these games and be a neutral observer. Sometimes those games can be a lot of fun. I've got a buddy of mine years ago. We would just go on the road randomly to catch a team. Like we did a road trip up to Rouyn-Noranda to go see the Huskies in the Quebec League, just to experience a game up there. And the atmosphere is something else. And it would be, I'd recommend that too. Just be a neutral observer at some of these junior hockey games, because then you soak in the atmosphere. You can just enjoy the game for what it is. And hey, maybe you'll become a fan of a Quebec team if you go on the road. If you've never been to Rouyn-Noranda, it's a long drive. It's still, I want to say, like 2.5, 3 hours north of North Bay. But Rouyn-Noranda, great road trip and a great atmosphere up there. Mike says, Barrie, Brampton, both at top of the Eastern Conference. Yeah, they could be the 1-2 punch. The Barrie Colts will be better. I don't know if they're going to catch the Steelheads if you look at the rosters the way they are right now, but I would agree, Mike. Brampton, Barrie should be 1 and 2 in the Central. Maybe they're the top 2 teams in the Eastern Conference. We'll have to wait and see what happens with Oshawa and Brantford. But Oshawa, Brantford, Barrie, Brampton. There's a lot of B's, but I would agree. I think Barrie and Brampton should be the top 2 teams, specifically in the Central Division. I don't understand how Sawyer Bolton got a contract. Every time he's on the ice, I get scared for the other teams. Oh, it's amazing. Sawyer Bolton, what a controversial figure. I did a few videos during the year talking about the suspensions, and I would have to say Sawyer Bolton has gotten a lot of attention. I think you just put his name in a video and people want to know what's going on. He only played 40 games all season, and he had 10 suspensions. That's both regular season and playoffs. So he plays with that sandpaper. He's got that grit. And at the American Hockey League level, they love it. That's the kind of style that he plays. And I think he might thrive with that way he plays, although there's other players in the American Hockey League that play that same style. So Sawyer Bolton, I think it's going to be interesting to see how he transitions from the OHL to the American Hockey League with the Lehigh Valley Flyers. But hopefully he can get more offense. I know that was one thing that for Sawyer Bolton with the London Knights, he was kind of becoming a bit of a problem on the ice with his reputation. And I think the referees took notice. And even if he was in the middle of a scrum, if he was just there, maybe he didn't punch a guy or anything, he would get sent to the penalty box. And unfortunately that happens, especially at the junior level. We saw that with Tyler Savard when he was with the Barrie Colts. He just had to be near the scrum. And 9 times out of 10, the officials would just send Savard to the penalty box just because they would assume he had something to do with it. So I think for Sawyer Bolton, yeah, maybe it's a surprise that he got signed at the American Hockey League level, but I think his game will translate well to the Flyers in the AHL. Brampton will make big moves. Look out. Yeah, I'm already. It sounds like from what I'm hearing that Brampton is already kicking a lot of tires. They're going to go all in. It's also going to be fascinating to see what's Brampton going to do with their goaltending situation, because they've got two grade A quality netminders with Jack Ivankovic and Ryerson Leanders. Yeah, you could do the 1A, 1B situation, but those two goaltenders, they're going to want the starting minutes. So I'm curious as to whether or not the Steelheads would move one of those goaltenders, because you have to figure if you move a goaltender of that stature, they could cash in. They could get a young player or a veteran player to help out front. I know there's some that would like to see Michael Misa picked up from Saginaw to join his brother Luke Misa with the Steelheads. If you got the Misa brothers joined together in Brampton, what a storyline that would be. So, yep, I'm expecting Brampton to make some big moves. It sounds like once the trade window reopens at the end of August ahead of training camp, expect to see some moves involving the Brampton Steelheads. Shouldn't there be a suspension for being suspended too much? LOL. I was kind of under the impression before this season that as the season progresses, the more suspensions you get, the tougher the suspensions will be. But it just seemed as though he would just get the minimum. I'm not saying that I agree with what Bolton was doing or with I don't want to challenge the league on that, because they've got their style, they've got their rules. I just thought it was interesting that his suspensions didn't grow as he continued to get suspended, because you do see that with other penalties, like the fighting rule. You're only allowed 3 fights in the Ontario Hockey League. Once you reach number 4, it's an automatic suspension. And then if you do it again, the suspension gets bigger. I'm kind of surprised with a player like Bolton that maybe the suspensions should have been growing to try and send a message that, hey, look, enough's enough. You need to smarten up. Because it kind of got away. Although his first suspension, if you remember, was in a game against the Owen Sound Attack, and it was for staging a fight. Although you look at the replay, usually a stage fight happens off a face-off, but it was I think it was about 10, 20 seconds after the face-off was dropped that Bolton dropped the gloves, and he got that suspension for that. I think it was a 2-game suspension at that time. That one was a little questionable, but still. I'm almost wondering if maybe the league will look into that. They haven't announced what rule changes will be going into next season. They usually do a meeting with the media to kind of go over what kind of rule changes there are. They usually do that leading up to training camp. So we'll wait and see if we do get an update in regards to the rule changes. I'll definitely make a video just to let everybody know what those rule changes are, because every year there's something that's new, and it takes a little bit to get used to, especially in the broadcast booth, because we're trying to stay on top of everything that's going on the ice, and of course all the rules around the Ontario Hockey League. So maybe that's a change. We'll see, and it has to do with in regards to suspensions. Mike says 2 overager spots available for Brampton and lots of draft picks in the cupboard. And that's where it's going to be very interesting with Brampton. They're going to use that to their advantage. There's a lot of overager candidates in the Ontario Hockey League right now, so they've got plenty of players to choose from. A name that I've been hearing a bit has been Dalen Wakely. I don't see North Bay trading Wakely right away. I would think that might be a trade that happens closer to the deadline, but could we see a player like Dalen Wakely end up with the Brampton Steelheads? He had a great season last year with Anthony Romani. They had a great 1-2 punch with the North Bay Battalion. So maybe a Wakely kind of move. Although you're trading within the division. And I know that doesn't usually bug teams too much. They still trade with each other anyway. But you kind of got to wonder, where do you draw the line with trading within your division? That's just something that I always think about. I've never been to Brampton to see a game, so I'm excited to see one this season. I'm curious to see what kind of changes they've done at the CAA Center. I was there for the last Brampton Battalion game. They played the Sudbury Wolves in the playoffs, and the Wolves eliminated Brampton. And at that time, there was no center ice scoreboard. It was just this purple box at center ice that gave you the time and listed the penalties. And it was just a very simple, basic atmosphere. So since they've had the Brampton Beast, I know they have a new scoreboard at center ice. They've got the scoreboard with the screen and everything. I'm curious as to if they've enhanced the atmosphere at all at the CAA Center since it was the Powerade Center. If you've never been to the CAA Center, it's got great sight lines. I do prefer the Mississauga rink for the sight lines, but Brampton is pretty good. There's also a lot of parking out there. The parking lot is pretty big, similar to Mississauga, so you don't have to worry about that. I just hope the fans come out, especially with how good this Brampton Steelheads team is going to be this year. This team is going to be one of the top teams in the Canadian Hockey League. And I know we saw this in 2011 with Mississauga, for example, when they hosted the Memorial Cup, and they still struggled to draw fans. So I hope that the fans in Peel region are able to appreciate the team that they're going to have on the ice next season. They're going to be a lot of fun to follow. But if you've never been to Brampton, I recommend it. I'm planning to go to the first game when the Barrie Colts are there. I believe that's in October. So that's when I'm going to be heading down to see what kind of changes have happened at the CAA Center. And it's also going to be weird when the North Bay Battalion go to Brampton for the first time. The old Brampton Battalion against the now Brampton Steelheads. It's going to be, for broadcasters, I'm sure that'll be a bit of a tongue twister. I think that'll take a little bit to get used to as well. Gavin, thoughts on Barrie's overager situation for next season? Well, for the Barrie Colts, I think we're going to see, Bo Jelsma should be back for sure. I think they're going to have some interesting decisions to make. I think that the Colts might look to bring in another veteran overager. I think for the Barrie Colts, this is going to be a good year for them, and I don't think they're going to want to waste it. Because when you look back at the season 2 years ago with Brant Clark, when they didn't know that Brant Clark was coming back, we kind of assumed he would come back from the LA Kings. I think that was a bit of a wasted year. And, when you're in the cycle with the talent the Barrie Colts have with now Cole Baudouin, Riley Patterson, they've developed such great chemistry. I would think Ty York comes back, but maybe they need to look to bring in an overage, a bigger defenseman on the blue line. So I think that the Barrie Colts, they do have a lot of question marks in regards to the OAs because there's so many available going into next year, but it's going to be, I'm really curious as to how Marty Williamson is going to handle the overager situation going into next season for the Barrie Colts. But either way, it's going to be a fun season. It's going to be, I'm really curious as to how it's all going to work out. Do they bring in another goaltender with Ben West graduating? Hillebrand, he had a great season last year, but who do you bring in? Do you bring someone in to insulate him, especially when you know that he's probably going to join Team USA again at the World Juniors? So you're going to need a goaltender that's capable to fill in for Hillebrand while he's away at the World Juniors. So it's going to be a very I'm curious as to the goaltending. What are the Barrie Colts going to do on that front as well? I know they want to bring in a big name player. They want to bring in a veteran. It'll be time will tell who that player may be that they bring in to add up front. But a lot of question marks right now when it comes to the Barrie Colts. I love North Bay and the Sudbury rivalry. Oh, that rivalry is fantastic. I just wish last year's playoff wasn't a 4-game sweep for the North Bay Battalion because that was the series. I was talking with Brian Cooper, who does the radio play-by-play for Sudbury, and he was so excited to cover the Highway 17 rivalry. And it felt like a bit of a letdown when the Sudbury Wolves couldn't get a win against the North Bay Battalion. But that just goes to show how strong that battalion team was last year. But it's great to see that rivalry is building. It took them a long time to meet in the playoffs because when you meet in the playoffs, that's when the rivalries really light up. Because look at the rivalry between Kitchener and London. They have met so many times over the last 10 years that that rivalry, it feels like that one is ready to explode. Just with, especially with last year. I know Sawyer Bolton was a factor in why that there was a lot of animosity between the Rangers and the Knights, but there's some really good rivalries right now in the Ontario Hockey League, and it's the playoffs that really amplifies things. Like even for the Barrie Colts and the Brantford Bulldogs, they've had a good rivalry too. But I know the Colts kind of took a step back last season, so the rivalry kind of cooled off a bit. But still, it's when you get a good playoff matchup, the rivalries turn out to be a lot of fun. I'm actually hearing Michael Misa as well. That's a very strong possibility. Yeah, well, I think it'd be fascinating to see what could the Saginaw Spirit get if they decided to move Michael Misa. Even Zane Parekh, you have to figure he's coming back from the Calgary Flames. So the Saginaw Spirit, you've got those two pieces. They could really rebound after hosting the Memorial Cup. You would think that you would get definitely a first-round pick if you waited until the OHL trade deadline, and teams would be lining up. Anyone who's considered a contender, they're just going to throw everything at the Saginaw Spirit to try and get Michael Misa. I'm almost wondering what would it take to get Misa and Parekh in one deal? Like that would have to be huge. But then it's the only team I could think of that could pull off a trade like that would probably be the Brampton Steelheads because they do have the draft cupboard. They do have some younger talent they can move on. Imagine if you had Michael Misa and Porter Martone playing together. Those two considered to go maybe top 5 in the NHL draft in 2025. So if you put those two in a deal with the Brampton Steelheads, look out. I guess with that too, would you send a goaltender to Saginaw? Do you send Jack Ivankovic to the Spirit and ride Ryerson Leanders, or do you go the other way around? It's going to be very fascinating, I think, this year just to see how it all plays out, especially with the contenders. Do the Erie Otters maybe look to pick up Michael Misa? They're another contending team. The Oshawa Generals, can they afford to make a big splash? I think time will tell, but yeah, Mike, like you said, Saginaw, they're in big-time rebuild. They need to restock their draft cupboard. They won the Memorial Cup. That was the goal. I know they wanted to win the OHL championship too, but that franchise, what a year last year was. And typically when you do have a big year, the next year you drop off. You don't usually see a team compete once again. I think the last real team that was able to compete after a Memorial Cup was the Windsor Spitfires. You look to when they won back-to-back Memorial Cups, 2009, 2010. And in 2011, they still found a way to get to the Western Conference Final. And they were knocked out by the Owen Sound Attack that year. But there was a chance that we almost had the Windsor Spitfires appearing in 3 straight OHL championships. We could see London do that this year, 3 straight championships, although just the one title because, of course, the Peterborough Petes knocked them out the year before. But it's going to be fascinating. And it's let the speculation begin. I know they can't do trades right now, but you have to figure the talks are brewing between the general managers. They might be at the cottage, maybe throwing some ideas at each other just to see what it would take to make certain moves. But it's going to be fascinating. Watch the Saginaw Spirit. I don't know if they're going to make big trades right away because if you remember last season with the Peterborough Petes, we all expected them to sell. They did that trade, Michael Simpson of the London Knights, before the season started. And we all figured, okay, this is it. They're going to unload. And they sat on their players because they were winning. The Peterborough Petes, they were top in the East Division right up until mid-November. They had to trade Connor Lockhart because they had over 3 overagers. And they sent him to the Oshawa Generals. And it just seemed like the team started to waver. And then finally the bottom fell out. And they just traded everything that they could to recoup picks and young talent. The Peterborough Petes, they're the model team for Saginaw right now. They did a great job at the OHL trade deadline. Peterborough will be good probably in 2 years' time with the young talent they have, and they're going to grow together, develop that chemistry. And, I look out for Peterborough in a season or two. Sudbury, North Bay, Oshawa. Maybe goaltending, a question for them. Seneca might not stick around. Niagara, another bad year. Too young. Peterborough, meh. Sudbury, North Bay rebuild. Yeah, that's where the Eastern Conference is very it's interesting. So you also have Ottawa. What are the 67s going to do next year? I think they're another team that's looking to the future, so they might sell off a few players. I've been hearing Mayich. His name's floated around there. Does he move to a contender? So yeah, the Ottawa 67s, another team that is looking to rebuild. So really, that leaves Barrie, Brampton, Oshawa, Brantford, and maybe Kingston. The Frontenacs are a very interesting team. I feel like they're middle of the pack. They've got the potential. I like Mann as a coach. He has done a great job there with the Frontenacs. It's just, do they have the pieces? Vakari is a great goaltender. He's going to do a great job. And then they picked up Lalonde from Saginaw. So you have Vakari and Lalonde in net. Kingston's going to be. I'm curious as to what the Frontenacs are going to do. Kingston, I don't think they have it. I feel like they might be that fifth seed. They might challenge for fourth. They'll be kind of maybe middle of the pack. But if Oshawa drops, say Beckett Seneca stays with the Anaheim Ducks, what do the Generals do? I feel like maybe they have to look to pushing back to the next season. So it's the Eastern Conference is fascinating. Brampton is clearly going to be the top team, but it's who's going to fall in behind. I think Brantford, Oshawa, and Barrie are probably going to be the teams chasing Brampton for the most part. How do you feel about Flint this year? The Flint Firebirds, they loaded up. I like the pickups they did. I think the Firebirds are they're an interesting bunch. They've got good goaltending. I like Day. Nathan Day is great in net. They picked up some good pieces there at the trade deadline with Clattenburg from the Sioux Greyhounds. I think the Flint Firebirds will be challenging maybe in the West Division. The West Division right now is so wide open. The Windsor Spitfires, they're building. I don't think they're going to challenge for top spot in the West Division. I could be wrong on that. The Sarnia Sting, they'll be better, but are they going to contend for a division title? I don't think so. Saginaw is going to go into a rebuild. The Sioux Greyhounds had players graduate. So maybe Flint, maybe they're seeing that there's an opportunity for them to take the division. I think the Midwest is definitely stronger than the West Division, and that's where I think it'll be a dogfight between the Erie Otters and the London Knights. But Flint, could they win the division? It's possible. I think the West Division is wide open right now. Why does Sudbury change coaches every single year? Great question, Mike. It seems like they're a team that likes to keep things in-house. Because if you look at Ken McKenzie, he coached the Sudbury Wolves in the early 90s. When I was there with the Sudbury Wolves with the radio broadcast, McKenzie was an assistant GM. He was also an advisor with the team. He was really involved, and really not much changes behind the scenes with the Sudbury Wolves. I get the sense they're hesitant to bring in new voices with the team because they're comfortable with what they have. And with that, Derek McKenzie, he was there briefly, but got an opportunity elsewhere. You had Stillman. He got the opportunity with the Arizona Coyotes. I feel like Stillman, if he would have been there a few more years, he would have been a great coach for last year. Maybe that would have helped the Sudbury Wolves overcome their challenges. But I do like their pickup with Barney coming over from the Humboldt Broncos. Hopefully, obviously, the Sudbury Wolves are going to be a team that's rebuilding. The question mark is what do they do with Quentin Musty if he comes back from Seattle or from San Jose? Because you're going to need. They do have the pieces in place that they could, maybe be middle of the pack, but do they go into a rebuild? Because the Sudbury Wolves last year was such a letdown, and I think it almost came down to the systems. Maybe coaching was their Achilles heel. How much longer is the stream going for? I was figuring we'd be going until 8:45, so that's an hour. So maybe we'll wrap it up in 5 more minutes. But thanks for everyone so far for tuning in. This has been tons of fun. I just love talking hockey, and it's great to have a community that we can talk junior hockey, the OHL, and it's it's been a fun year. I'm surprised we're at 201 subscribers last check. In all honesty, I didn't think the channel would make it past Christmas, but you guys came out and supported the channel. So this channel wouldn't be possible without you guys tuning in, and with the views, the likes, the shares, and it's a great spot to talk hockey. And I think that for the OHL, like I said, the best development league for the National Hockey League, and we get to watch this in our backyards if you live in Ontario, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. So it's thank you very much for everyone who's been tuning in, especially with this live stream. I know it's been a small live stream, but still, we've had it's been fun just seeing the comments and just having the good the chats. Because we're in the middle of summer, we're all, I think, a little antsy to get the OHL season underway. Changing the coach every year doesn't make sense. No structure. Yep, that's totally a great point about the Sudbury Wolves. And I think for Sudbury, it's just, you just got to scratch your head. They're the team with the longest championship drought. And I think it comes down to what's going on behind the scenes with the Sudbury Wolves. It's Dario Zulich. He's doing everything he can since he bought the team from the Burgess family. And it just seems like they've got a lot of people who are still from the Burgess era, and the team's kind of just going in circles. They're going to get that new arena, which is huge. They need it. And the Sudbury, I have to make a couple of trips up to Sudbury before they build that new rink, because if you haven't been to the Sudbury Community Arena, it's a classic barn, but yeah, they need a new home. So it's going to be big when they can get that new facility up and running. Everything was about Saginaw last year. Kind of annoying. It was like, who cares about everybody else? Well, that's why I started this channel. I wanted to be able to talk about all the teams in the Ontario Hockey League, not just the Saginaw Spirit. Obviously, Saginaw, the host, first American team to host for the OHL. It's a big deal. It's great to see what the Saginaw Spirit were able to do, but it is nice to be able to talk about some of the other teams in the OHL as well. And I know for the Barrie Colts, they don't get a lot of coverage. It's just the media landscape here in Central Ontario. But it is nice to talk about all the OHL teams. It's actually been interesting as I post videos about other teams and seeing the view counts and which teams get more views than other. I'm a stats nerd. That's why I do the whole broadcasting thing. So when I see the video view count, it's really neat just to see what teams get the most views. And I was actually kind of surprised how many people watched my videos about the Steelheads. Next to, I think Barrie is probably the most viewed, followed by Sudbury. I would say the Steelheads and even the Kitchener Rangers. Those are probably the most viewed videos that I have on the channel. So it's just kind of neat to see. Daniel says, I love Dave Cameron now, and that's structure and a coach. Yeah, Dave Cameron does a fantastic job. That's why he's going to coach Team Canada at the World Juniors. He's got that reputation. He's a no nonsense kind of guy, and you kind of need that with a team. Like you see how the Ottawa 67s play with Cameron behind the bench. You don't see the team taking those extra penalties after the whistle. You don't see the amount of suspensions like some other teams have got. He wants the respect. He has his expectations. Defense first, and that's why the 67s for the last few years under Cameron, they've been quite successful in what they do. Obviously, this year it's going to be a little different. I think 67s they're going to go into a rebuild, but Cameron does do a good job there. Mike says, "Keep up the great work. Love it. It'll be a great season." Well, thank you, Mike, for that, and it's a ton of fun, and it's great to see all the OHL fans who are been tuning in, and yeah, it's going to be a great season. I'm looking forward to it. We'll probably do a live stream closer to the start of the regular season, just to get everybody on the same page as we get ready for a new year. I'm hoping to have Gene on at some point. We're going to do our predictions for the Eastern Conference. I'd also like to get Mike Farwell on again. Mike is he's a great character at the Kitchener Rangers. I love chatting with him, so I'm hoping to get him on as well to do a season preview. So we'll have to wait and see on that front. But thanks again, everybody, for tuning in, and thank you very much for all your support. If you're a subscriber, thank you for hitting subscribe. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, that's okay. When you want to hit subscribe, that's great. If this channel continues to grow, then I think I'm going to have to get a new setup or something. I'm using my dining room space here in my small house might not cut it. Might have to upgrade some things here. But either way, thank you very much for everyone who's tuned in to the live stream. I'm going to continue with the OHL history videos. We're now past the halfway point on that, so stay tuned for that. So I'm going to end the live stream here. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in for this. And yeah, we'll talk to you guys again soon.